guess I'm going to get it. I just wanted to make a couple of explanations on the archetypical dream format that I gave, which is for my dream is just the two trees behind a barbed wire fence. And I recognize this as Van Gogh's format for the painter on his way to work. The picture that was lost in 1945 at the end of the war. Okay, and the idea is, in presenting this format, I did know that the subconscious was trying to tell me that he's watching, looking for something that I'm also looking for, only he's doing it from inside the dream state. He's not looking through my eyes. Now the two trees are for the two eyes, so he wants to make a point that he's looking around them. And whenever you have an obstruction like that, they're going to appear as cylinders. It's a topographical feature. Instead of having just two balls up there, he's looking around. He's looking around a pair of cylinders. Okay. And of course, he was walking along the road with his shadow. It was bright sunlight, and they were carrying either walking canes or mile sticks that pointed to the pebbles on the road that they were walking on. And the idea is that those spherical shapes are typical of the dream state because there's no structure to them. They can't be assigned a structure or easily manage to build a structure. They just sort of float. They're there. I didn't actually learn about those from Van Gogh. I learned about those from Cézanne. And Cézanne has, that's what I call the Van Gogh stipple, because you only have to use a stipple with your brush to make a pebble. But Cézanne's is a chevron. It's the meeting of, say, a corner of your canvas. So any two lines that connect like that, like the canvas, corner of your canvas does, this line and this line, it's a two-stipple with your brush, but it's a form that cannot be assimilated by the subconscious because it requires a structure. And that was Cézanne's point in producing it. And he contraposed that to the circular shapes of some of his apples. And voila, I realized he was using those in that manner for that reason. He does a picture, Femme Fatale, I think it's called, where he's got a great big chevron at the top of his canvas, and his model is inside that, as well as what he's painting. His painting is over here, and it's got a rose on the table over here. And that's Cézanne's. Okay. Of course, Van Gogh's was just a sphere. Now, where that comes from, where that format comes from, is this right here. Hope that shows up pretty well. I think it is. This is a typical drawing of the brain from the underside. Looking at it from underneath, this is the left eyeball and the right eyeball. And what you have is the optic nerve coming off the eyeballs. One crosses over to the other side of the brain, and one goes directly backward on the same side of the brain. So you have the left eye connected to the right part of the brain but the right part of the brain is also connected with the right eye. And meanwhile, the left eye connected to the left eye connected to the right part of the brain is also connected directly back to the left part of the brain also. So the point is, you have this cross product of the light waves come in and hit the little receptors in the retina, and they send these electrical charges along the optic nerve, and then the optic tract is what it's called once it gets behind the point where it crosses over. And the signals disperse. I have no idea what all this means. Disperse in the visual cortex, and I assume that's what the brain, these are the signals that the brain has to use to construct a visual image or a dream state image or meaning out of what it sees. So the simplest way to express this, if I were starting this all over and I was about 20 years old, I'd want to go after a sort of a mathematical representation. It would be a matrix representation where you have A, B, C, D for the optic nerve parts, and E, F, and G, H for the optical tract, the optic tracts for these signal, for the path of these signals. And then what you have is, the idea is that the brain has 1, 2, 3, 4 main centers that it can take these electrical impulses and use partial or maybe permutated constructs from the input. And so in the dream state, the subconscious is looking back here in the visual cortex and looking at what the signals it has from, what comes in from the outside, how it constructs whatever it wants to construct. And so if you make a matrix out of these two, you assign there's some kind of operators. This is sort of a standard mathematical procedure. If you were doing something like that and you knew something about the mechanics of what the different parts of the brain or different signals here, what they were doing to real constructs in the real world that they were focusing on, then you would be able to express whatever they see, whatever is constructed back here, as the product of the product, sum and product, superposition of the product of these inputs. So in the simplest, what I've got here given here is the simplest way you could do that with just simple pair of matrices and using matrix multiplication and addition. For, say, a vector, if you have a vector, you're transforming it through coordinate transformations according to what the mental process does to those images. So that's what I would want to do if I were starting all over. I'd want to go after what the best form of these kind of elements would be, and how they combine, like the algebras, that matrix algebra down here is actually are. And then you could formalize it mathematically to any degree that you're capable of making measurements and observations of what actually is. Which could be, for example, what the painters put onto the canvas. So, you have if you put fence line here, and you have these two trees here, I will say something about the use of a cylinder for that. It's a topographical feature of a space that that if you wanted to project across the space, and if you were going between scales from a smaller scale to a much larger scale, if you wanted to test to see if you could do that, the test would be to use a cylinder to pass from the start to the end of whatever that pathway would be in a different scale to see if the cylinder is structurally sound, or like a logarithmic scales that were set like you see on log papers, where it exponentially expands at first and just to a power of 10, but then in the second to a power of 100, the second scale, and so forth. You couldn't build a cylindrical construct that could pass between those. Something within the structure of the cylinder itself would fail, and parts of it would be missing or whatever. So there is a topographical reason, this is what the SC thinks, I'm not so sure of it all myself, to use a cylinder. And when I began to realize this, that my dream format and Van Gogh's dream format are the same, the subconscious does a series of dreams, 2 or 3 different dreams. It uses a format in a current different application, where the 2 trees become, say, the cylinders of a porch, of architectural support. And also does tests with the little spheres to see if in the dream state he can construct anything. And he does this several times and always fails or succeeds. From my standpoint of view, he proves out what I believe about that. So anyway, you have a fence running here, and you have the 2 trees here, and the subconscious is behind looking out. And in Van Gogh, he's also painting from the prospect of the subconscious. So he joins his subconscious, which becomes his shadow, back here, and he's looking out to the, again, past the eyeballs to the field of corn and the city in the background and all that stuff. Okay, that's the one point that I wanted to make here on that. Now for the fun part. Raphael. This is a couple of simple pictures, but a very complicated, should be a very complicated explanation. I hope I get all this in here. I guess so. Okay. So here I have 3 representations. These 2 are simplified models of the woman who is in Valeta. Is that right? Am I saying that right? Who was the model was apparently linked with Raphael romantically, and he does a couple of pictures where one is the semi-nude and the other is the Valeta. And this here is a similar deconstruction of the Mona Lisa, which I want to use to compare. Okay. Let's go back to this brain picture for just a minute, because I want to make a picture. I want to make a point. Just by the symmetry of this, what you have is 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And if you paint a picture that combines all 4 of those points, and what you have is a quadriptych. I think that's the way that you say that. Oh, I have that word in here all the way. Quadriptych. And a good example of that is I'm going to explain or make a rationale for the Mona Lisa here at the end of this. But it naturally shows that you can combine elements of, this would mostly be in the subconscious, of the subconscious, and the conscious, and the subconscious, and the conscious, into a single picture, and what you have is a quadriptych. Although more typically, pictures are given in just the diptych, which is two-part, one for the subconscious and one for the conscious. Okay. Now, I need to say a little bit real quick about my message. What I'm doing here is I'm going through the history of painting, starting with the ancient Egyptians and going all the way up as far as I care to in the modern era. And I'll run through, over a period of 6 months or so, I'll run through that entire period. And I'll get stuck on pictures like La Valeta, and I'll try to analyze them with what I know, and then I'll take that problem in the back of my head and I'll run through the history again, and I find things that have to do with that that other painters are doing, and that's what I use to interpret how to solve my problem. Okay. So I'm going to have a bunch of stuff to say about this general stuff from the history before I get into the actual picture itself. But what Raphael has done, he's painted, it's almost a paradox. I'm a little bit unfair to Raphael because I'm cheating on what I'm saying that he does. He doesn't actually do it. He goes right up to the line where he would be incorporating subconscious imaging visually into a conscious construct, the classical construct of the figure. And when I say that for my purposes, I'm trying to figure out exactly what he's doing, so I'm going to exaggerate by saying I'm going to make the assumption and I'm going to force the interpretation that when he uses this flesh tone that he uses, he forces in it a translucence. In other words, he makes this a color field that does not actually have a surface, and it's right here in the picture is where it happens. Right to the left of this ribbon on the model's left side. But he doesn't actually do that. He takes it right up to the line. His picture is perfectly balanced, so it stays in the conscious legal construct for the figure picture, but he pushes it as far as he possibly can, and that bothers the heck out of me. So I take it I'll say, well, he's really gone too far. And you can convince yourself that the color field is translucent here. That what you see this vague area where it's not really clear where the surface is. It's not as clear as it ought to be, is what I'm saying, but it's not really true. I'm forcing it because I want to force this test. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use that. I'm going to say, well, he's got a translucent color field. You can see into it. You can see a certain depth into it. You can't tell how far. But actually, what he's actually really showing, for the record, is he's correctly showing that where this line of this blouse meets the skin isn't precisely given. You can't tell where that occurs. So that's where the extra space is. It's where it's in that indeterminacy. But I'm saying I'm going to force that to say I see the color laying on the skin, and the indeterminacy is the indeterminacy of the depth of that color field. And I'm going to push that, and I'm going to make it physically happen. So how that happens has a really interesting historical story behind it. And it goes back to Van Gogh when he talks about one of Malay's pictures. I think it's the Gleaners, and he says he doesn't understand how Malay can show parts of the background that are behind the figures that he's painting. In other words, you can look in the picture and you can see around the big figures into the background behind it. What he's actually meaning with that is that Malay is painting in what we call, I know I'm going to forget it, claymation. We make movies like that where the perspective is local and the pictures in the movie are modeled locally. Now, because of the size of the human body and the nature of the thing that it is, when we look on a normal scale at another human being, we see that. We don't process it like we process a tree in the far background with a normal set of classical linear perspectives. I'm sorry, Malay knew that, Van Gogh realized that, and he realized what Malay was doing. And this is what I want to put on Raphael here. So this model is essentially like the Pillsbury Doughboy. That's the way we naturally see the ordinary human body, because at the distances that we normally deal with people, that's the sort of the default setting for the focus of perspective. It's the same as with claymation. And I suppose you could say some things that are macro, we're seeing them up very close. You might have that sort of problem too, but it's typically true of people. So I'm going to force her to be like a claymation model. This color field is the body of dough. If you look like the Pillsbury Doughboy, think of him. It's a solid substance of which she's made. And I'm going to use that to focus. Now the whole trick to this picture is that she has this Valeta that she's wearing on her head, okay? And it generally is right behind the line of her forehead, but when it comes down over on this side, it's much closer to the side of her face. Okay, now I take a picture of it. If I got it, my phone would say I chop it down. I chop it down like this, and now I'm going up. I'm hitting this picture every couple months or so, and I'm trying to force. I'm understanding about the perspective, and I'm trying to force it. Okay. Now he's got a contraposing set of conditions here. You've got this solid body, this color field, okay, that you can see into, is translucent. And she's essentially a Pillsbury Doughboy. She's just like an egg on top of her neck. And in this case, when you start cropping the picture down, when he's painting the picture as a whole, he only has a certain amount of focus that he covers the entire picture with, okay, that's the plane of focus. When it gets to the face, though, he has to tighten that field of focus down because he's got to paint more detail in it. And you see this all the time, in fact, almost everywhere in alla prima painting, that then that will be a secondary plane of focus inside the picture that is shown with more explicit details. It just focuses your attention to that point in the picture. And this is also going on here, okay? And what happens is this plane of focus has to break through her head at a certain point. Okay, and the natural point for that to do with is the bottom point of the Valeta. Okay, so the Valeta sits on a point on her head in this plane of focus so that everything below and inside the Valeta is sticking out of the plane of focus. Okay, and that's how you can tell that her face is a solid thing, is that it's poking through that plane of focus. That's one dynamic that he has going. The other dynamic, which is a contraposition to that, is the shadow on this side of her face and her neck. Okay? So you have those two things going, and they're contraposed to each other. Now, so you're going to use that to focus the picture. You're going to forget about, when you step back and look at the whole picture, you naturally see her face exactly as Raphael intends you to see it. And the features of her face, her eyes, her nose, her mouth, the way the face is folded, is turned into the picture, and how much of it is sticking out to form a forward-facing profile. The volume of that is given just by the shadow. But when you're talking about looking at these planes here, and where the Valeta, the top of the Valeta cuts the plane that is in, cuts the back off the rest of that volume and only exposes a part of it to be in front of that plane. Then you start using the Valeta by following the lines, okay, to see how they also determine where the surface of this volume is inside, you see, beneath the fold of the Valeta. Okay, and I'm coming up to this every couple of months, and I've been learning, and I break it down every time I hit this picture. I break it down even more, and I'm insisting more and more that I'm following these lines here. And that's actually a relativistic, a form of relativism, classical relativity, when you're doing that. Because what you see depends on not only where you're looking at it from, but the direction that you're going in, how you're moving with respect to what it is you're looking at. And that's what relativity is. And it contraposes the shadows, okay? So you've got this different way of looking at it. And this other way of looking at it is essentially from Van Gogh's perspective, because the solidity of this form is what he's after. You notice that in a lot of his pictures, he shows the solidity of what he's painting by the texture of it and the nature of his strokes. It eventually got to a point where this overcomes what Raphael is doing with just the pure shadows and the classical elements of figure painting. And what you see then is that the lines that are made in the face, which show the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, the position of the muscles in the cheeks and the mouth, they're doing something different than they are with the shadow, okay? They're there in support of what the lines show you about the solidity of the face. And what following these lines and everything does is it eliminates, as you use it, it eliminates portions of the volume which are outside of that plane of focus. So, and the lines that make the face, eyes, nose, the lips, and all of that, are anti-opposed to that. They're just there. They're not there to show you where her eyes, nose, and mouth is. They're there to convince you that this face is sticking out in front of the plane. That's the reason that they're painted. And at some point, if you stay with this interpretation and you stick with it, at some point those lines fail. They don't do their job. And what that happens, this is something that you physically see when you're looking at it. The face flattens and it falls into a circle. And what you're looking at is something like Picasso paints, where you've got a round face staring you straight on, but it's got a profile of a nose and an eye. So you're looking at it, that's what happens. This profile that is so meticulous and solid in the classical application of figure painting, it just falls into a plane, and you see it. You see it with your eyes. You see her just collapse like a deflated balloon. I saw something like this in a Van Gogh picture where it's a self-portrait. He's looking over his shoulder, and he's got those green jagged lines going up all up the canvas. He does that several of his pictures. It was in a book, and I was looking at it, and all of a sudden those lines just started moving up. It was just like you see in the Matrix movie when all the little glitters in the computer go down the screen, except they're going up the screen. So I'm looking at a picture in a book that's been folded back so it's open and I can look at it, and I'm seeing a video screen instead of the picture, and those lines are actually moving. They're flowing up. There's a current of those lines flowing from the bottom of the picture to the top. It's the video. So that's a hallucination, but and the subconscious produces it. But at the same time, Van Gogh had to have been aware of that mechanic in order to paint the mechanic that does it, which is what he painted in the picture. I counted out seconds, 8 seconds. I sat and watched that picture moving like that. It's just like what you see in the movie The It, when they open up the books and the clowns in the old pictures from 100 years ago or so, and he's jumping around and shit on the page of the book. It's just like that, but for 8 seconds, and then it went back to normal. And I tried to redo it, and I couldn't, but I couldn't forget what I saw either. And I know that Van Gogh does that on all his portraits. If I could figure the trick to what's doing that, moving things in those other portraits, and I would be able to see the same damn thing happen in his other pictures. I would be able to see it move. But I ain't as good as Van Gogh. And here, the same sort of thing is happening, but I forced it to happen. And what Raphael has done, he's gone so close to that line that he allows me to make this little cheat here and just push it right over the line. And he was good enough to do that. I can't gainsay anything Van Gogh does. I can't gainsay anything Raphael does, because I'm nowhere near. I don't have any sensitivity of the picture itself, of the process, that's even close to what they're using. Okay. So there you have. So he does that on purpose. That's the reason the Valeta is there, to set that whole thing up. Because if he didn't use it, I'm not sure what would happen. But whatever it would be, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting as that. And this is typically a diptych formulation, a twofold, because the shadow shows, in the classical sense, the one perspective, which would be the subconscious perspective, while the facing brightly lit side is the two, which is the first person of the normal conscious state, is what's presented consciously in the picture. And he just puts a jinx on it with that Valeta. Okay. And this contraposes to the Mona Lisa, where you've got on the right, on the left of the model, you have a straight-on background perspective. It's like you're looking at it through a rifle scope, straight on. Whereas on the right side, it's lower. And that's a bird's eye view. So if you have a gyroscope that's exactly level, you're going to have to point your telescope down to get the perspective. And they're two different ones. But what he does is he lets this proceed into the face itself, and actually the body, the way the body is presented, so that 1 and 2 are both the same side. Her right eye, left brain side, and 3 and 4 are the same side, which is her left eye, right side of the brain, which is the bull's eye. And then you have, well, really it's a bird's eye, but it doesn't have to be very much. It's and of course it's noticeable. But he doesn't have anything in the body or the face to contrapose that. So it's a synthesis all the way across, and it is a quadruptic. It's got 4 parts to it. The picture does. It's like 4 panels put together. Her face and her personality, the right side brain, and the left side, the right side or left side brain showing the subconscious or less conscious aspect. Okay, so this is a trick, a test, if you will. I went back and tried it just last night, and I didn't get anything for trouble. But I'm just, right now when I look at it, I'm trying to do it like all at once. Whereas over the years, what I would do is I would take 30 or 40 minutes to really sell myself on how these perspectives set up in these canvas and these planes of focus. What was her spatial relations, a part of the face to that, and how they, you know, there's a fight between the shadows and the planes of focus, and how that works out. And I did this, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and always taking, 30, 40 minutes or an hour to look at it before it happened. But when it happened, there for a while, a couple of weeks, I couldn't look at it without it happening, without watching her face just melt into the plane of the canvas. Okay, so that's 2 big tests, and that's all I wanted to give for now. Thank you very much.